Aloha. I want to welcome Mark Rolfing. I always enjoy having Mark as a guest on the Emily T. Gail Talk Story Show. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Emily. Thanks for having me again. Same time next year.
Yeah. Well, hopefully at the Rocket Mortgage Classic in the summertime in Detroit. But we're out at the Mitsubishi Electric Championship at Hualalai at the beautiful Four Seasons Resort Hualalai on the Big Island of Hawaii. 26th year this event has been here. Longest running tournament at one venue. And a few words about this week's event, and then I want to get on to some other things. Here's your thoughts.
First of all, not only is this the first event of the year on the PGA TOUR Champions, it's the best event of the year. I can attest to that. I've been to most of them, not quite all, but most of them. This is my 26th year also, believe it or not. I think back in the early days, and I remember the first year we only had about 10 players in the field because they only took champions from the year before on the senior tour back then. And I think Hale Irwin won 9 tournaments that year, and Gil Morgan maybe won 8. And so they had a very small
17
field.
people in that first
17 people in the field. So the next thing you know, all of a sudden, quietly, the format changes, and the next year Arnold Palmer shows up, and Jack Nicklaus and everybody, and off we went. This place is magical. I love the Big Island. I come here a lot now, probably 4 or 5 times a year. And I really like it. I'll always live on Maui, but I think, for me, going somewhere to get away from everybody and kind of do all the fun things that I typically do, the Big Island's got it all. So that's why I love coming here. And, I'm getting paid a lot of money today to go out and walk around with Ernie Els and Stephen Ames and BJ Singh and try and describe what they're doing on TV. I'm a blessed young man.
And BJ has some local roots here. He's got
BJ
a place over
here.
in
He does for sure. Never had a great record here. It's kind of interesting to me. I would have thought he'd have played a little better here. But this is the best he's done since, I think, 2018. He struck the ball beautifully in the second round on Friday. And, I think he could have held a few more putts. But, there's 5 or 6 guys, I think, that can probably still win this thing. I think you probably have to be 11 or 12 under. There's so many players there that it's going to be hard to come from too far behind here.
Well, I'm kind of favoring Jim Furyk because I've always loved Fluff. I met him back in the 1990s when he was caddying for Peter Jacobsen.
Oh, wow.
And Peter was representing Waikoloa Beach Resort here.
That's right.
And so, it was really fun. And then, of course, he went with Tiger for a number of years, and he's been with Jim for a long time. And he's a good player himself, or had a good game.
He's a great player, I'll tell you.
Wonderful ambassador for the game.
Well, I'll tell you a great Fluff story. So I haven't told too many people this story, but when Fluff was caddying for Tiger in his first round at Milwaukee, Tiger's first round as a pro, that would have been 96. I was the on-course commentator. And it was on Saturday, I'll never forget, on NBC, or no, ABC it was at the time. And Fluff came over to me on about the fourth or fifth hole. He said, "Hey, Rolf, will you do me a favor?" And so I said, "Well, what is it?" He goes, "I just want you to tell everybody that this is just a temporary gig. I'm still Peter Jacobsen's caddy." So I said, "All right, Mike, I'll tell him that." So I said that on the air. Fluff just wanted everybody to know that he's still caddying for Peter. Well, we get around to the 8th hole. Tiger goes birdie, birdie, par, birdie, birdie, hole in one. And so walking over to the 14th tee, Fluff comes over to me and goes, "Hey, Rolf, I think I just changed my mind."
Oh, that's funny. And of course, back then, it wasn't a sure thing.
No, it wasn't a sure thing, but I guess banking your future on Tiger Woods was a pretty sure thing.
That's a great story, and I just want to mention that Peter Jacobsen is so fantastic. I was fortunate enough to cover the AT&T. I made sure I got press credentials on the year that Tiger and Kevin Costner played, because I had become friends with Kevin when he was doing Waterworld over here. So I got over there, and I saw him the night before, and we walked out on the beach, and he told me what to do so I could get inside the ropes beyond my press credentials. And he said, "Just holler, great shot, Kevin." And so on one of the holes, I said, "Hey, good shot, Kevin." And he looked up and he said, "Auntie." He lifted up the rope and he waved me in.
Yeah,
and
nice.
I was with their entourage for 4 days, so press credentials were great, but that was even better.
Yeah, no kidding.
But Peter has been so fantastic. And I mean, I remember at the AT&T, he won that prior year. It was only, 18 holes or something. It was a shortened tournament because of the rain. And I asked him if he'd do an interview, and he said, I'm coaching my Mickey, his son's basketball. He said, I'll be busy. But do you know that he ended up going to a phone booth? It was before we had cell phones or something. But he's just such a great guy. I love that guy.
I do too. You know, I feel badly that he can't play Champions Tour much anymore, just because he's got so many physical challenges with his injuries that he's had over the years. He's had a couple hip replacements, I think maybe even a knee. PGA Tour Champions could really use Peter Jacobsen being out here, and I've talked to him about it. I think he ought to work some of these telecasts. I think he would be great.
I do
on
too.
these
He's
shows.
wonderful.
I would love to see him.
He knows the local style, and he did play a couple events here, I think, in the early days.
Oh,
but
for sure he did.
you mentioned earlier on, you know, back when the senior tour started, and even before the senior tour started, I know that you were a great mentor to Kelly Fleer, you know, and as you have been to me, and we've both had mentors, and I first met you when you were with ABC doing the senior skins, and you just were so kind to me and generous with your time, and you mentioned Arnold. I mean, let's go back to before the senior tour started. Bob Goldby, who passed this week, Jay Haas's uncle. I mean, those guys, people forget they're the pioneers, you know. In some ways, they pay a price.
Well, you know,
they started it.
Bob Goldby had a lot to do with the start
Yeah,
of the senior
exactly.
tour, for sure. And you know, Arnold Palmer, now it's been 5 years since his passing, and I miss him every day, Emily. There's not a day that goes by that I don't somehow think of Arnold Palmer. Let me turn my phone off.
You know, I was thinking about Arnold, and I've always had on my ironing board one of my favorite pictures, and I couldn't find it this morning, but it was a picture of Joe Gibbs and myself. Years ago, when he came to play in the senior skins with Arnold, Joe Gibbs was the founder of the Golf Channel. He had the original idea, and he had to convince Arnold to get on board with him. And I just want to celebrate Joe, because, you know, what an idea that was. People forget how many people laughed about it. They couldn't even get on general cable initially.
I'm going to see Joe next week on Maui, actually, because a good friend of ours, both Joe and mine, that was the executive producer at the Golf Channel, is coming out to Maui for the week, and so he's called up Joe, and they're going to come up and play golf one day.
Oh, I love that. Give him a hug for me, man. When they played in the senior skins, I met him out at the airport, because Arnold flew a Citation every year. You know, he was such a pilot for years, set a tone for that, right?
But you know, Joe tried to sell me on the Golf Channel idea, and I said, Joe, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard of in my life. Who's going to watch golf 24 hours a day? And where are you going to come up with all this programming? And here we are 25 years later, and I can't stop working for them.
Yeah, and then you go back, like I walked back to the TV compound yesterday. My God, all those trucks. I mean, the sophistication and the drones and things like that. Kind of missing you in the booth this week.
Yeah, I'm missing
some
being in
cultural
there a little
stories.
bit, but you know, it's also nice being out on the course. The thing I can't do on the course is I can't get into all my Hawaiiana and talk about the Big Island quite as much out there, because I don't have a monitor with me, for one thing, so I can't see what's on the screen. But I know it looks great, and I know everybody's saying, hey, we got to go there. I heard the first round rating on Thursday was one of the best, if not the best, that we've had here in like 5 or 6 years.
Isn't that
something? I heard the
something?
rating was really good. So the weather's really bad on the mainland right now, pretty much all over the mainland, and a lot of people are watching golf. Sony and Century had huge ratings.
Yeah, let's just talk about that a minute, because the Century, my goodness, that tournament is right up there. It has raised the bar on that a few years, you know, not even 10 years ago. I think there were some doubts about, not doubts, but, you know, it was lagging a bit. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I was leading the charge. You know, I was pretty unhappy with what was going on. You know, the best players were skipping the event, and I said, you know, maybe the date needs to change. It's pretty close to Christmas. Maybe the format ought to change. We ought to include a few more players if everybody's going to skip all these years. Well, we didn't do any of that. But I'll tell you what happened, Emily, is the young players really started to embrace it. It was when Jordan Spieth and Dustin Johnson and Justin Thomas said, you know what, this one is really important. We're going to go every year. And they started going, and this past January, 2 weeks ago, of the 40 qualifiers for that tournament, 39 of them played.
Just Rory, right? Was the only one?
Rory was the only one that didn't, and he was, you know, getting himself ready for Abu Dhabi, where he is this week. But the Hawaii swing is alive and well. It's not as big as it was when you and I were kids, but it's still alive and well.
Oh yeah, I hear from people all over the country. You know, Dick Mudry, you know, a longtime golf writer, and Jack Berry, of course, a longtime golf writer as well. and I'm sure you know both of them quite well from over the years, going way back.
Yeah, that goes way,
50
way, way
years,
back.
you know,
Right.
probably, or not for you, but that, you know, way back. So a couple mentors just I want to mention because they've been wonderful to me, and the first one would be Toss Rohr, you know, the president of Waikoloa Land Development, but before that he was over at Kapalua.
Yeah, he was
So-
my boss for years and years. He everything good that's happened to me in the business world, I attribute somehow to Tom Rohr. I saw him last week during Sony. I was the host of the Sony event at the convention center on Thursday night. He and his lovely wife Robin were there, and I got a chance to talk with him a little bit. He's an amazing guy. He was the original thinker. He was the big visionary. You know, he always. I remember. I was thinking the other day, I was flying back from the mainland and I was sitting in first class, and I remembered a story of Tom Rohr. He said to me early on when I was just coming up as the marketing guy, he goes, I always want you to fly in first class because you're going to meet somebody in there every single time you fly that's going to be a potential customer. But he said, I don't ever want you to take a free ticket. There's no such thing as a free lunch. So I want you flying first class, but I want you paying for it. And I'll never forget that about him. He had tremendous scruples, and he was the original visionary as far as I'm concerned.
I agree, and you know, of course, now over at Waikoloa Land Development, a master plan community, which has been, they have really evolved in a very thoughtful manner, I think. And same thing, first time I called Tom to kind of help me out in sponsoring something, you know, I mean, he was just been so supportive. I would have to say that in some ways he's just really given me respect for what I do. It's kind of unusual, not unusual what I do it, but I do it in my own way.
Not everybody does, probably.
And you are the same. Have always given me that respect. So a couple others, Buster Bustamante, director of golf at Montalani for so many years. I'm going to get teary because unbelievable, that guy, how wonderful he was to me. I had quit playing golf. I had tried for the LPGA, and after Arnold won at the Senior Skins, I said, I want to play again. He gave me a set of rentals, and he supported me to go out and play some events on the Futures Tour. But what a guy, huh? What a visionary.
He really was. You know, I remember the first time I ever went into his office there at Montalani to see him, and I felt like I was going in to see King Kamehameha, literally. He commanded so much respect, and everybody just loved him, especially the people that worked for him. And Buster, wow, what a guy that guy was.
Yeah, I have a lot of fun. I'm in touch with Norm Blandell, who was the first pro there, and Jerry Johnson hired him, and Norm is from Detroit area. And so we've known each other for years, and I just heard from him again yesterday. But that's kind of fun, the first head pro.
Wow.
You know, he
yeah.
didn't even apply for it. He had taken a group over there, and he had lunch with Jerry, and at the end of lunch, Jerry said, will you come over here and be our first head pro?
Oh, nice. That was a good break.
So next one would be Ted McAneely. For so long he was with Prince Resorts, Hawaii. Of course, he was a hockey player with the Edmonton Oilers, and Wayne Gretzky took his place, and then Ted went over to Japan and played hockey for Cebu Railroad, I believe it was, which owned all the Prince Resorts, and got into the hospitality industry. He really mentored me and gave me support. I was doing some events on all 3 islands with all the Prince Resorts, and he gave me great support.
Yeah, he did, and I was actually a consultant for Prince Resorts for a couple of years and got to work with Ted. The thing I really respected about Ted was he was a hospitality industry guy, but he didn't really understand golf through and through. He had a great vision. He knew the way hotels worked and all that, but he was just smart enough and sharp enough and Akamai enough to know that he didn't know everything about golf, and he leaned quite heavily on all the people around him when it came to golf. So many people think they know their way around the game, and they don't, and they end up making mistakes. Ted wasn't like that at all. He sought a lot of support when it came to the golf business, and Ted's a great
Interesting
guy.
that you say that, because when I went to him, I wanted to put on some events at Mauna Kea, Hapuna, you know, teach some clinics for women, and at the same time, I knew we couldn't get any publicity over here because the Honolulu stations didn't talk about the outer islands at the time. So I approached him about doing the same thing on each Saturday with each Prince Resort, Maui Prince, Hapuna Prince, and Hawaii Prince golf course. And he understood the value of that and totally let me go with it.
Yeah, wow, that's cool. Yeah, that's Ted. That's Ted in a nutshell for you.
So yeah, so mentors, you know, and I just want to, you know, put out to you, I've heard more than a few people say how wonderfully you've been to them, and if you take just a few minutes to talk about your and Debi's program that you do with foster kids.
Well, Debbie and I have had 31 foster kids throughout our lives. We're in just under 25 years of doing it now. Typically, we have a program where we take a child that's been just born, like day one of their lives, and usually there's an adoption that's been scheduled because the birth mother has decided she couldn't be the mother of the child and raise the child. But then when the child is born, if there's a complication, typically it's drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be a race issue, it could be things like that, and the adoption falls through, these kids tend to go into sort of a black hole and get lost in a system. And so we take them for, usually it's 3 months to 6 months, at the beginning of their lives, and nurture them and keep them safe until we can find an adoptive family for them. Now, having done that 31 times, we now have BJ, who we did that with 11 years ago. He's going to be 11 next Thursday, believe it or not. BJ has been with us off and on for 10 years. Birth mother has tried very hard to be able to take care of him. She lives in Lahaina. We're up at Kapalua. We're only about 9 miles from his family. He's got 2 sibling sisters. But it just hasn't ever really worked out trying to reunify with the mother, and so consequently we, Debbie and I, are now the legal guardians of BJ. And so we've got him, he's here at Hualalai. You know, he gets to go to kids for all seasons. He gets to go out and watch Ernie Els play golf if he wants to. He can go swim with all the marine life if he wants to. What a life.
Yeah, well, what a blessing that you two have been doing that for so many years, for so many people. And moving on, you know, my hometown, Detroit, I was so happy that you covered the Rocket Mortgage Classic in Detroit last year. I grew up going to the Buick Open. That's what inspired me to want to play professional golf. You know, following those players back in the 60s and going to the LPGA event in Toledo. And I played with Marilyn Smith at the time, back in the 60s. And she sent me a Christmas card for many years. That was my first LPGA event. But for PGA to get back to Detroit, they had the Ford Seniors for many years in Dearborn at the TPC course. But being right in the city now at Detroit Golf Club, and you were there covering it last year, and then the Alley Challenge, being back up at Warwick Hills where the Buick Open was, and I love that Jim Furyk won that. But what a great blessing for the Detroit area to have the Champions Tour and the PGA Tour there.
Really is. Detroit
and LPGA to have a couple events.
Detroit's one of the great golf towns in America that people don't really look at as a golf town. And I used to work the Ford Senior Players back when I was with ABC, and I was actually a little disappointed that we weren't in downtown Detroit. There's a reason we were in Dearborn. Ford, F-O-R-D, they were the sponsor. That's where their headquarters are. They owned the course and built the course there, the TPC of Michigan. But with all the great classic courses that are downtown in Detroit, I really missed being down there. And frankly, everybody else was staying out in Dearborn, but I like staying downtown in Detroit. I love going to baseball games and just feeling the vibe of the city. So for me to get back to Detroit this past summer and see how Detroit Golf Club had embraced it, and the fans there were just remarkable.
Well, Jason Langwell, the tournament, you know, and what a visionary they've been, all of them.
They did a great job. And, you know, it's not a big course. It's kind of a small course in a pretty compact area, but it turned out to be a great test for the players. And I love that event. I can't wait to get back to it.
Well, the Rocket Mortgage Classic is in my conversations a lot when I use my movement that we started back in the 1970s. Say nice things about Detroit.
Yeah.
It's one of the great stories. Well, Mark, it's great to see you. I know you got a busy day out there today here at the Mitsubishi Electric Championship, and we'll be watching on the Golf Channel.
And we'll do this again.
Thanks so much, Mark. Okay, aloha.